Episode 18, Clip 1, Aviation Updates, Bidenomics, and the Trump Economy, and Getting Fed Up with the Fed.
They hadn't even retracted their landing gear yet, and they were without power. And prior to the last episode, I'd seen a preliminary report from the area in the investigation, and I didn't want to comment on it because it seemed so shocking, and it was literally
Just hard to believe.
yeah, and it just had just come out. So I said, let's give it some more time. But here's a story from Straight Arrow News, this confirming what we knew then, even as unbelievable as it is. Here's an update on that.
Details in the investigation into last month's deadly Air India crash, raising sharp questions about what happened in the cockpit. A black box recording reveals the flight captain turned off switches that controlled fuel to the engines just after takeoff. That's according to a report by the Wall Street Journal, citing sources familiar with early findings by American officials. The first officer flying the Boeing 787 reportedly asked the senior captain why he cut off the fuel sources, saying he seemed shocked, then panicked as the captain stayed calm. A preliminary report released last week did not name which pilot did what, only that one questioned the fuel switches being moved to cutoff, while the other denied it. But these latest findings strongly suggest it was the captain, though it's still unclear if it was intentional or accidental. Data shows the fuel switches were moved 1 second apart, then switched back on 10 seconds later. The plane crashed moments after takeoff, killing 242 people. One passenger survived. Some U.S. officials are now calling for a criminal investigation. A former NTSB official says the timing of the fuel cutoff, with no signs of trouble, suggests a deliberate act. Still, investigators caution it's early. They're not ruling out design flaws or mechanical issues. Air India's CEO is warning staff against rushing to judgment, saying the investigation is far from over. For more unbiased updates, download the Straight Arrow News app or go to san.com.
So the fuel switches, there's one per engine. You have to lift them up and then pull them back. You can't just, even if you knock them, they're not going to just change position. They have a safety on them that requires you to pull or retract upon the switch to be able to move it. So what appears to have happened is one engine was cut off, and then within a second, the other engine was cut off. And then it would appear that the first officer, co-pilot, then attempted to restart regain.
Yeah, good for him, yeah.
Put the fuel switches back on. The problem is there's a whole restart procedure, and the plane was barely off the ground. So there wasn't enough time for these engines to spool up and get started again. And obviously, if this was done intentionally by the captain, he knew that at that point in the flight, there was no recovery. There was nothing you could do.
It seems like he turned it back off after the first officer tried to fix the issue.
It's one switch off for one engine, one switch off for the other. Within momentarily after that, the engine's cut off because they're fuel starved. They start losing. You could feel the plane sinking. So what seems to be the first officer, co-pilots, what's going on? They look, and there's obviously things that you will look for, and there's actually a checklist. So he identified right away that the fuel switches were turned off. He knew he hadn't done it, so that's why in the Cockpit Voice Recorder, he's asking the other pilot, why did you turn the engines off? And he's like basically saying he didn't or didn't respond, and they attempted to restart the engines, but there's just no time. I think from the takeoff, from the time they rotated the aircraft to pointing upwards to leave the ground till the crash, like 39 seconds. So there wouldn't be enough time to restart the engines anyways. It was a foregone. Once the engines were shut off at that altitude, there was even turning the fuel switches back on really was just not
Unfortunately, it's devastating, but it seems like it's a deliberate suicide kind of by the captain, theoretically. And he decided to take 241 people with him. I remember maybe 5 or 10 years ago, I think we discussed this extensively. There was another suicide, but that was way more cool and much less devastating. It was an airport employee. He used to drive some of the vehicles around the airport, and he decided he wanted to commit suicide. So he practiced flying like 737s on Flight Simulator X. And then once he had enough experience, he literally just got into a plane and he took off. And I think the Air Force sent some fighter jets to pass by him, and they started communicating with him. And he was like, "Hey, I just want to commit suicide. Let me be." And I think he ended up doing some pretty cool aerial maneuvers and then bashing the plane into a deserted island or into the ocean or something. But he made sure the plane was empty and there was nobody on the plane. So he damaged the airline or the airline's insurance. Obviously, he took them down with him, but he didn't kill 241 innocent people, let alone the people on the ground. This captain, if he did it deliberately, it's just the definition of evil. Like, even if you do want to commit suicide in a cool way by kidnapping planes, and we do not endorse that, do it with an empty plane and fly into an empty island. Don't shut off the fuel to the engines right after takeoff in an extremely populated Indian suburb. So it's just horrible, heartbreaking, really.
Yeah, I remember watching that a lot when it was being literally live streamed.
Mhm.
That was Seattle Tacoma International back in 2018. And it was what's really ironic about the whole thing is that this gentleman who was not a pilot, was not formally
Yeah.
trained as a pilot, was able to get not only the plane off the ground, but pull maneuvers that that plane was not designed for. You think the wings would have ripped off given
Yeah,
that.
he did some pretty cool shit out there in the air. He had some fun.
So the ironic part of it was they tried very hard to convince him to try to land the plane, and he just didn't listen. But ultimately, the sad part is this guy could have had you clearly had a knack for flying aircraft, and had his mind been functioning normally, he might have been able to pursue a career in aviation. Very tragic. So you always wonder about these very odd things. I think these are certainly out of the ordinary kind of things that are one-off, unusual. Certainly, if there had been any in the Air India incident, if it was a terrorist action, there would have been someone claiming responsibility, which there has not been. But that's where we are with that. And here, in the United States, there's been some near misses. There was, but these were not certainly to do with intentional desires, but we had a military bomber that was flying in the direction of a commercial flight, which had to aggressively avoid the plane. Then we had another near incident of just a few days ago. And then in aviation news again, as if people aren't like scared enough, we have a more recent Boeing 737 MAX that was flying Denver, Colorado to Miami, which blew out a tire and required people to evacuate the aircraft. Again, none of these were the fault of the crew in any way at this point. But this last one, we do have some of the evacuation, which I think is interesting to see. I think there was just one minor injury because you can see as we're going down these slides, getting out of the airplane. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not like going to Disney World. Let's play that clip real quick to put in perspective what an aviation emergency looks like.
You okay? No, he's not.
You're right. Leave room for the fire truck. Watch out for the fire truck. Everybody, remain calm. Fire's here. Fire's here.
And again, only one minor injury, I think, coming down the slide. Otherwise, okay. This is a tire fire. They blew a tire, and with the aggressive braking, just like in a 18-wheeler can cause fires on their tires, a fire started, so they had to evacuate the airplane. But
Yeah, I was just on a road trip and I was driving behind a truck. It wasn't even a very big truck, but maybe it was like a big van. And suddenly, I literally saw part of the tire kind of rip off and come shooting right at me. Thankfully, it missed us. And the truck continued to drive fine. So I guess it wasn't the full width of the tire, it didn't blow out completely. But yeah, it happens on roads, let alone in planes. But the 737 just can't get a break, huh?
yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because it was actually a passenger on the plane that indicated that they saw one of the tires roll by the front of the plane. It just kind of rolled on by, and they knew at that point there was a problem. And then they saw the smoke and so forth.
Although I gotta say, the slides really do seem pretty cool. Yeah, an amusement park should have some of these slides. In Mexico City, there's this. It's like a kids city. It's really cool. They basically have all the functions of society, but a miniature version for kids to play in. And they have the whole airport and airplane and stuff like that. So they should probably install some of those slides because they seem pretty fun.
Well, again, I think that most people would agree that you could spare a little bit of fun if it comes to this. But listen, that being said, every day is an adventure potentially. And just like even tracking the stock market or the economy. I mean, this past week, there was a lot of talk about a viral image that went out. Here, let's post that. This was actually trying to give the impression that the economy under Trump was so horrible during first term, and that under Biden things were doing so well.
By somebody who can't read a chart, that's for sure.
Well, it looked like the economy was booming, but until you realize those are costs that were booming, not
And grocery prices.
higher lines were bad thing, bad, not good, bad. Someone just took a quick look at it and thought, oh, that's the economy's booming, it's doing great. No, those are higher prices during the 2020 post 2020 election, which is when the Biden-Harris administration was in office. Everything, cheese, alcohol, groceries, dairy, produce, and meat were all skyrocketing. Yeah, so that was obviously retracted. I guess that wasn't. So it's important.
It was posted by somebody on the Biden team or something.
Yeah, I believe so. And I think that's the. I think it's important to read what the graph represents before you go and make conclusions as to how good or bad it is. I think that was the issue. They didn't really seem to. It just looked good, colorful. Definitely was colorful.
Yeah. The blue shows everything going up.
Meanwhile, I think it is important for us to see where things are in the economy. And this is some information we just posted this past week for us to get a feel for what we're thinking. Here we go.
Retail sales higher than expected, inflation lower than expected. These are all wins, and these are wins for American consumers.
Did the fancy pants economists blow it?
It's a technical phrase.
Irredeemably, Kevin.
No, they'll always have a job trying to forecast. 50% are wrong all the time. The only vote I ever look at is money. Where does money flow? Sovereign wealth, more than 50 cents of every dollar comes to the U.S. It has for the last 200 years. The minute that stops, then something's wrong. It's where the cash goes. Always follow the money. It just follows the path of least resistance for returns. It looks for the safest place to invest. Even through all the upheaval and all the crazy stuff that's happened over the last 6 months, the cash keeps a-coming.
Yeah.
And that's all I look at.
And by the trillions under President Trump, we've talked about
That's for
a
sure.
lot of
Oh, yeah.
sovereign wealth
Trillions.
heading toward the U.S.
Yeah, so there has been a lot of money flowing in, a lot of new investment. Japan just announced this past week that they were going to invest, was it $500 billion? That
Yeah, part of their new agreement.
and Trump can pick where that money is. It could be for oil pipelines, it could be for solar, it could be for coal.
Anime sex toys.
It could be whatever it needs to be. But that's impressive. That's unprecedented, by the way. I don't think we've ever had a situation where foreign government.
$15 trillion is just a mind-boggling amount of money, and that's obviously promised investments over the next decade. But still, it still is a lot of money, and we've seen inflation come down drastically, and it seems, although now it kind of upticked a little bit, but Jerome Powell was really late. He's been characterized by late. He was late to raise interest rates under Biden in order to give Biden extra credit, and he's been very late to reduce them under Trump to not give Trump credit. And yeah, that's why there's that whole beef going on. But
I do think that some of his actions are politically motivated.
Be sure to watch our other clips and shorts and the entire episode 18 of the Yojo Show podcast.